I'm Mia, 28 years old, and my life changed forever during what was supposed to be a simple family vacation to Colorado. What my family thought would be a funny prank, leaving me at a gas station in Wyoming, turned into a big moment that changed my whole future. Let's see if she can make it back on her own, they laughed as they drove away. But I never did come back. Not for 16 years. The family that left me behind eventually found me, but by then, I wasn't the same person they had left before. I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and join me as I share how being left behind helped me find myself. Growing up in the Johnson household meant I had to be tough from a young age. My parents, Lisa and Mark, thought that making jokes at our expense was a way to build character. My brothers, Jake and Ryan, followed their lead perfectly, creating a family where someone always had to be the target, and that someone was usually me. Our family photo album is filled with pictures that look like fun but felt like embarrassment. Like my 10th birthday party, where they tricked me into thinking no one was coming, only to surprise me after I cried for hours. Or my middle school graduation, where they pretended to forget and showed up late on purpose. And high school prom night, when they told my date the wrong address. After every incident, they would say, "Can't you take a joke, Mia? We're just having fun." Mom was sneakier with her mean comments. She would make backhanded compliments about how I looked, especially as I became a teenager. "That dress would look great on you if you lost 15 pounds, or you'd be pretty if you smiled more and fixed your skin." Dad was more straightforward. He would laugh the loudest when one of my brothers played a prank on me. Jake, the oldest at 32, worked at Dad's insurance company and was being prepared to take over one day. Ryan, 30, handled marketing for the business. Both of them learned from our parents that emotional teasing was a way to bond. Family dinners often included stories about the latest funny prank they pulled on a friend or coworker. I had just graduated from college with a graphic design degree 3 weeks before our trip to Colorado. Everyone expected me to join the family business too, designing their marketing materials and websites. I had already said I wanted to apply for jobs at creative agencies in Chicago, where we lived, but my parents thought that was unrealistic. "You can do your little art projects for the company," Mom said at my graduation dinner. "It'll be so much more stable than trying to make it on your own." Money was tight, and college left me with student loans. My parents had kept me dependent on them, paying for my apartment but always reminding me that their support could disappear if I didn't show enough gratitude. I was working part-time at a coffee shop but wasn't close to being able to support myself. The Colorado trip was supposed to celebrate my graduation, a week in a rented cabin near Rocky Mountain National Park. From the moment we got into our family SUV, the mood was tense. "Did you remember to pack a brain this time, Mia?" Ryan joked as I loaded my suitcase. "Remember when she forgot her swimsuit during the Florida trip? I was 16 then, and they wouldn't stop so I could buy a new one," then laughed at me for sitting on the beach fully clothed for 3 days. The first day of driving was filled with the usual tricks, Jake hiding my phone and watching me panic until I found it in his pocket, Ryan eating my lunch while I napped, and Dad taking a detour and blaming my map reading skills. Small mean things I had learned to expect but still couldn't quite get used to. That night at the hotel in Nebraska, I overheard them in the next room. "She's too sensitive," Mom said. "The real world is going to eat her alive if she doesn't toughen up. Maybe this trip will finally teach her to stop being such a pushover," Dad replied. I went to sleep with a knot in my stomach, trying to stay positive. "Just 5 more days," I kept telling myself. Then I could focus on job applications and finally start building my own life. I had no idea how true that thought would be or that the next day would be the last time I ever traveled with my family. The second day of our road trip started with an unusually nice mood. Looking back, I should have seen it as the calm before the storm. The family being nice right before pulling a cruel prank was a familiar pattern. We crossed from Nebraska into Wyoming around noon, and the landscape changed to rolling plains, with mountains in the distance. "We need to fill up," Dad said as we approached a small town called Pine Ridge. The gas station he pulled into was one of those small places with a convenience store attached, sitting on the edge of town with nothing but open land around it. "I'm going to use the restroom and grab some snacks," I told them as Dad started pumping gas. "Anyone want anything?" "Get me a Coke," Jake said, not looking up from his phone. "Grab me some beef jerky," Ryan added. Mom just shook her head, busy fixing her lipstick in the mirror. Inside, I used the restroom and then spent a few minutes picking out snacks. The store was empty except for the cashier, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes named Miranda. I paid for the family snacks plus a bottle of water and some chips for myself. "You folks just passing through?" Miranda asked as she handed me my change. "Yeah, heading to Colorado for vacation," I replied with a smile. "Well, enjoy your trip," she said. Those ordinary words would echo in my mind for years after, the last normal moment before everything changed. I pushed open the door to the parking lot, juggling the bags of snacks, and stopped in my tracks. The spot where our SUV had been parked was empty. I blinked, confused, thinking I had somehow turned around and was looking in the wrong direction. But a quick look around confirmed what seemed impossible: my family was gone. My first thought was that Dad had moved the car to the air pump or another part of the station. I walked around the small building, checking every corner of the property. Nothing. They probably just went up the street to that sandwich place I saw on the way in, I told myself, though a familiar sick feeling was already forming in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and called Dad. It rang until voicemail. Same with Mom. Then Jake. Ryan answered on the fourth ring. "Where are you guys?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I could hear laughter on the other end. "Oh, we're about 20 minutes down the road now," he said, not hiding his amusement. "Turn around and come get me." My voice rose with panic. "Let's see if she can make it back on her own," I heard Jake yell in the background, followed by more laughter. "Ryan, this isn't funny. Tell Dad to turn around now." I was pacing now, my heart racing. "Check your messages," he said before hanging up. A text from Jake came through while I was on the phone. It had a photo of all of them in the car, grinning widely, with the caption, "Survival of the fittest, sis. Find your way home." I called back immediately, voicemail. Called Mom, voicemail. Dad, voicemail. Jake, voicemail. They had all blocked my number. I stood in the parking lot, the Wyoming sun beating down on me as the reality of my situation slowly sank in. They had left me on purpose in a town I'd never heard of, in a state where I knew no one, with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. I checked my wallet, $43 in cash, my debit card with maybe a couple hundred in my account, and my ID. My suitcase with all my clothes and toiletries was in the trunk of the SUV. My phone battery was at 18%. As the afternoon went on, I sat on the curb outside the gas station, going through disbelief, panic, and anger. I kept checking my phone, expecting a message saying they were turning around, that the joke had gone too far. Instead, I got a group chat photo of them at dinner in a restaurant with the caption, "Wonder if Mia found dinner yet?" Rolling on the floor laughing. Miranda approached me cautiously as she was finishing her shift. "Honey, you've been sitting here for 3 hours. Are you okay?" The simple question broke me, and through tears, I explained my situation. "Your family left you here on purpose?" Her shocked face mirrored my own. "They think it's funny," I said, wiping my eyes. "A character-building exercise or something. They've done things like this before, but never this bad. Do you have anyone you can call? Friends back home?" I shook my head. My closest friend moved to California last month. I didn't know anyone who could drive all the way out here. The isolation my family had created around me, subtly discouraging close friendships and making me dependent on them, had never been clearer. Night was falling, and the temperature was dropping with the sun. My phone battery was now at 8%. I had one more call to make. Dad answered surprisingly. "Have you learned your lesson yet?" he asked without any greeting. "What lesson?" "That I can't trust my own family." My voice was shaky from crying. "Don't be so dramatic. Figure it out yourself. Consider this life training," he said coldly. "Call us when you've made it back to Chicago." "How am I supposed to do that? With no money and nowhere to stay?" I demanded. "You're a smart girl. Get creative." He hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief as it displayed one last message from my mom. "This is for your own good, Mia. You need to learn self-reliance." Then my phone died. Miranda had overheard enough. "I know someone who rents out a room in her house. Her name's Eleanor. Let me call her for you." As darkness fell over the small Wyoming town, I realized I had a choice to make: desperately try to get back to the people who had abandoned me, or take the first step toward something else entirely. Eleanor turned out to be a silver-haired woman in her 60s who lived in a small yellow house 3 blocks from Pine Ridge's Main Street. Her spare room was simple: a twin bed, a dresser, and a small desk, but it was clean and felt safer than any option I had considered during my panicked afternoon. "Miranda explained your situation," Eleanor said as she showed me around. "You can stay here tonight, and we'll figure out next steps in the morning." She lent me a nightgown and some basic toiletries. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed that night, I cried until no more tears would come. Part of me still expected to wake up to apologetic texts or missed calls. My family, having realized they'd gone too far to morning, came with no such relief. Eleanor let me use her landline to call my parents' number, which I still knew by heart. No answer. I tried the family business line. The receptionist said my parents and brothers were in a meeting and took a message. They never called back. "I need to charge my phone and check my bank account," I told Eleanor over the simple breakfast she'd made. "I need to figure out how to get back to Chicago." But when I finally got my phone working again, the messages waiting for me only confirmed what I was starting to accept: this joke wasn't ending anytime soon. Day 2 of Mia's great adventure read a text from Jake, along with a photo of them hiking in Colorado. "Have you started hitchhiking yet?" from Ryan. And the most hurtful from Dad: "Call your apartment manager. Rent isn't being paid while you're figuring this out. Consider it motivation." Mom added, "This is what tough love looks like, honey. You'll think of this someday." I checked my bank account: $237.42, not even enough for a bus ticket back to Chicago, let alone first and last month's rent on a new place when I got there. Eleanor found me sitting on the porch steps, staring blankly at my phone. "Bad news?" she asked gently. "They're not coming back," I said, my voice empty. "And they've stopped paying for my apartment. I have nowhere to go back to." Instead of pity, Eleanor's face showed determination. "Then you stay here until you figure out your next move. I charge $300 a month for the room, but you can work at my bookstore to cover it until you get on your feet." Her bookstore, Pages and Poems, was on Main Street. I could use help a few days a week. "It doesn't pay much, but it's something." That afternoon, Eleanor showed me around the small bookstore she'd owned for 30 years. It was charming but clearly struggling, with outdated signs and a barely functional website she'd paid a nephew to create years ago. "I also need a job that pays actual money," I told her, "for food and saving up to figure out what's next." The next day, I applied at every business in downtown Pine Ridge. By sunset, I had a waitressing job at the Pinewood Diner, working the breakfast and lunch shift 6 days a week. My first week passed in a blur of exhaustion and crying jags. I worked from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the diner, took a short break, then helped Eleanor at the bookstore until closing. Every night, I checked my phone, and every night, the messages from my family became more sporadic and less apologetic. I was still waiting for that call saying, "You've made it home." Dad texted on day 5. By the end of the second week, they had stopped messaging altogether. My coworker Amber found me crying in the break room after my shift one day. At 25, she was a single mom working 2 jobs, and she recognized the look of someone at the end of their rope. "Family trouble?" she asked, sitting beside me. The whole story poured out of me: the years of jokes, the abandonment, the mean texts. When I finished, Amber was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed my perspective entirely. "Sounds like they did you a favor by leaving you here." "What? Those aren't pranks, Mia. That's abuse. And now you have a chance to build a life without it." That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scramble to get back to Chicago. I wasn't going to beg for the return of a family that had shown me they didn't truly care about my well-being. I was going to stay in Pine Ridge, at least for now. The next day, I used the bookstore's computer to email my college professors, explaining my situation and asking for references. I created a new email address, one my family didn't know, and began researching how to replace my ID documents, which were back in my apartment in Chicago. "You're good with design, right?" Eleanor asked me one evening as we were closing up the store. I could use new flyers and maybe some social media help. It was the first chance I'd had to use my degree since graduating. I created a fresh, modern flyer for an upcoming author event, and Eleanor was thrilled with the results. "You should meet Mason," she said. "He does web development for businesses around town. He might have some work for someone with your skills." Mason turned out to be a bearded guy in his 30s who worked remotely for tech companies while living in the small town for its low cost of living and outdoor access. He took one look at my college portfolio and nodded approvingly. "I could use someone to handle the visual side of some client projects," he said. "I'm terrible at anything requiring artistic talent. Want to learn some coding while you're at it? It might make you more marketable." For the first time since being abandoned, I felt a glimmer of hope, not just for survival but for building something meaningful. My family had thrown me away, expecting me to come crawling back. Instead, I was finding my footing on my own terms. As my first month in Pine Ridge came to a close, I received a final text from my mom: "This silence is very immature, Mia. Call us when you've grown up." I blocked their numbers one by one and turned my focus toward the future. The downtown of Pine Ridge consisted of just 4 blocks of businesses, with the Pinewood Diner anchoring one end and Pages and Poems bookstore near the other. Between my shifts at both places, I quickly became a familiar face to the locals. People stopped asking if I was just passing through and started greeting me by name. "Morning, Mia," became a regular chorus as I hurried down Main Street from the diner to the bookstore. Eleanor's bookstore website was my first real project. Working evenings with Mason's help, I rebuilt it from scratch, adding an online ordering system and a clean, modern design that highlighted upcoming events and local author spotlights. "This is incredible," Eleanor said when I revealed the Finished site. Business is up 15% since you put those event posters in the window, and this will help even more. Mason was equally impressed. You've got a natural talent for UI design, he told me after our third coding session. You're picking this up faster than most of my clients ever do. At the diner, Amber introduced me to her circle of friends, other young people who had either grown up in Pine Ridge or landed there seeking affordable living and a close community. For the first time in my life, I was making real connections with people who liked me for who I was, not what I could do for them or how I could entertain them at my expense. During my second month in town, I received an email from my Chicago landlord asking about my plans for my belongings. I'd missed 2 months of rent, and they needed to clear the apartment. I can't afford to come get anything, I wrote back. Please donate whatever's useful and dispose of the rest. It was a painful email to send, giving up the physical reminders of my old life, but also strangely freeing. The things my family had given me over the years always came with strings attached, with reminders of how grateful I should be. Starting fresh meant freedom from those constant debts of gratitude. Mason connected me with a small business owner in a neighboring town who needed logo design and marketing materials. It was my first freelance client, and though the pay was modest, the sense of accomplishment was huge. You should think about building this into something real, Mason suggested over coffee one morning. There's no decent design agency within 100 miles, and these small businesses need help. They're all trying to establish online presences without the skills to do it properly. The idea took root. By my third month in Pine Ridge, I had 3 regular freelance clients alongside my work at the diner and bookstore. I'd saved enough to move out of Eleanor's spare room and into a tiny studio apartment above the hardware store on Main Street. It was barely 400 square feet, but it was mine, the first space I'd ever had that wasn't contingent on my family's approval. The morning I moved in, I bought a small potted succulent as a housewarming gift to myself. This is the first day of your new life, I told myself as I placed it on the windowsill. No more looking back. That same afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar Chicago number. Normally, I would let unknown calls go to voicemail, but we had several new client prospects, so I answered. Is this Mia Johnson of New Horizon Design? A woman's voice asked. Yes, it is. How can I help you? My name is Jennifer Atkins. I'm an editor at Business West magazine. We're doing a feature on women entrepreneurs who've built successful businesses in unexpected places, and your agency was recommended to us multiple times during our research. The interview she requested led to a 4-page spread in the magazine 3 months later, featuring photos of our office, my team, and me standing confidently in front of the business I'd built from nothing. The article told the story of a young designer who had moved to a small Wyoming town and identified an unmet need for professional design services in rural communities. I had shared only the broad strokes of my journey with the magazine, omitting the abandonment and family estrangement. Those details belonged to me, not for public consumption. But the piece emphasized how I had arrived in Pine Ridge with almost nothing and built something substantial through determination and community support. 2 weeks after the magazine hit newsstands, the emails began arriving, first from my mom, then my dad, then each of my brothers. Subject lines ranged from, "We need to talk," to, "Saw your article," to, "Please respond." I deleted them all without reading them. Then came the phone calls to the agency, which my office manager fielded with the instructions I'd given her years ago. Ms. Johnson does not accept personal calls from these numbers. I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated my mother's determination. On a Tuesday afternoon, I returned from lunch to find Lisa Johnson sitting in our reception area, looking older but just as put together as I remembered. "Mom," I said, stopping in the doorway. "How did you find me?" She stood smoothing her expensive slacks, her eyes tracking over me, noting my professional attire and confident posture. "You look well." "I am well," I replied, my voice neutral. "Why are you here? Can we talk somewhere private?" I considered refusing, telling her to leave and never come back, but after 5 years of healing and growth, I found I was curious rather than afraid. What could she possibly have to say that would matter now? "My office," I said, leading her down the hallway past curious employees who had no idea of the significance of this visitor. Once the door closed behind us, Lisa took in the awards on my wall, the view from my window, the evidence of success all around. "This is impressive," she admitted. "The magazine didn't do it justice." "Thank you," I said, remaining standing. But I doubted she came all this way to compliment my office. "We made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "What started as a stupid prank went too far, and then pride and stubbornness kept everyone from admitting it. By the time we realized how serious it was, you were gone." "It wasn't just the abandonment," I said quietly. "It was a lifetime of cruelty disguised as humor. It was teaching me that love meant enduring humiliation. It was creating a family dynamic where someone always had to be the target. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. I know. I see that now. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue. Your father would never admit it, but when we saw that magazine article, you building this successful business, looking so confident and happy, it forced us to face what we'd done. Not just that day in Wyoming, but your whole life. What do you want from me, Mom? Forgiveness? A family reunion? I want a chance, she said simply. A chance to know the woman you've become. A chance to be better than I was. I studied her, looking for the manipulation that had characterized our relationship for so long. Instead, I saw something unfamiliar, genuine regret. I can't give you what you want, I said finally. Too much has happened. But I can tell you that I'm happy here. I've built a good life with good people who value me, and knowing that should be enough. Lisa nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. Your brothers want to see you. Your father too, though he'd never ask. I'm not ready for that, I told her. I may never be ready, and that has to be okay. She stood to leave, then hesitated. You were always the strongest of us all, Mia. It just took us losing you to realize it. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time, processing the encounter. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no falling into each other's arms with forgiveness and tears, just the beginning of a recognition that the past couldn't be undone, but perhaps it could be acknowledged. That evening, as Sam and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I told him about my mother's visit. How do you feel about it? He asked, his arm around my shoulders. Surprisingly peaceful, I replied. For so long, I was defined by what they did to me. Today, I realize that chapter truly is closed. I'm not the abandoned daughter anymore. I'm just Mia, business owner, community member, partner. I turned to smile at him. And I like who I've become. The next day, I sent my mother a brief email with a single photo attached, me with my team outside our office building. No invitation to visit again, no promises of reconciliation, just a glimpse of the life I'd built, the person I'd become. It was all I was ready to give, and for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 16 years after being abandoned at that Wyoming gas station, I stood in my kitchen staring at a certified letter that had just arrived. The return address was from a law firm in Chicago that I didn't recognize. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it. Dear Ms. Johnson, it began. We represent the estate of Richard and Lisa Johnson. We are writing to inform you that Johnson Insurance Group has been sold, and as per your parents' instructions, the proceeds are to be divided equally among their 3 children. I sat down at the counter, my legs suddenly unsteady. The letter continued with legal details and a request for contact to arrange the transfer of funds, a substantial amount, according to the preliminary figures included. Sam found me still sitting there 10 minutes later when he came home from work. What's wrong? He asked, setting down his briefcase. My parents sold the family business, I said, passing him the letter. They're splitting the money between Jake, Ryan, and me. Sam read quickly, his eyebrows rising at the amount. That's unexpected. There's more, I said, holding up an envelope that had been enclosed with the legal documents, a personal letter from my mother. I hadn't opened it yet, unsure if I wanted to know what it contained. In the years since Lisa's visit to my office, our contact had been minimal, occasional emails, a Christmas card once or twice. I had maintained firm boundaries, rebuffing attempts at deeper reconciliation while acknowledging the small steps toward change I had observed. Do you want me to leave you alone to read it? Sam asked. I shook my head. Stay, please. The letter inside was handwritten on my mother's personal stationery. Dear Mia, it read. By the time you receive this, the sale of the business will be complete. Your father has finally retired, somewhat against his will, as his health isn't what it once was. We've decided to move to Arizona for the climate. Before we leave Chicago, we're hosting a family gathering at the house. Jake and Ryan will both be there with their families. I know you've kept your distance, and I understand why, but things have changed, Mia. Your father may not say it in so many words, but the decision to include you equally in the proceeds from the business sale was his. He recognizes, in his way, the gravity of what happened all those years ago. We would very much like you to attend the gathering next month. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to close old chapters before new ones begin. With love, Mom. She had included the date, time, and address along with her cell phone number. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Are you going to go? Sam asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wanted to see what 16 years had done to all of them. Another part thought it was better to leave the past in the past. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about the invitation constantly. New Horizon Design was thriving, with offices now in 3 states. Sam and I had been married for 8 years, with twin daughters who had just turned 6. My life in Wyoming was rich and fulfilling, built on genuine connections and mutual respect. Did I want to risk reopening old wounds? Did I want my daughters to know the family that had discarded their mother so carelessly? What would you tell Lily and Emma if they asked why they've never met your parents? Sam asked one night as we discussed the invitation again. It was a fair question. Our daughters knew about Sam's family, who visited a couple of times a year from Montana. They had asked about my family occasionally, and I'd always given vague answers about them living far away. I would tell them that sometimes families hurt each other in ways that can't be easily fixed, I said slowly. But I would also tell them that people can change and that forgiveness is possible, even without forgetting. Do you believe that? Sam asked. That your family has changed? I thought about the tentative emails over the years, the careful respect for my boundaries, the equal inheritance that could have easily excluded me. I think they've tried, I said finally. Whether it's enough, I don't know. After much deliberation, I decided to attend the gathering, but on my terms. I would go alone, leaving Sam and the girls in Wyoming. I would book a hotel rather than staying at the family home, and I would limit my visit to just the day of the event, flying in that morning and out the next. The house looked exactly as I remembered it, a large colonial in one of Chicago's affluent suburbs. As the Uber dropped me off, I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked up the familiar path to the front door. My mother answered my knock, her face lighting up with carefully restrained joy. "Mia, you came." "I did," I said, accepting her brief hug with as much composure as I could manage. The gathering was smaller than I expected, just my parents, my brothers, and their immediate families. Jake's 3 children raced around the backyard while Ryan's wife, Allison, helped my mother bring food to the patio table. My father stood when I entered the backyard, looking much older than I remembered. The confident, sometimes cruel man who had dominated my childhood seemed diminished somehow, his frame thinner, his movements more careful. "Mia," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Dad," I replied with a nod. The initial awkwardness gradually eased as the afternoon went on. Jake's children, curious about their aunt who had lived in the mountains, peppered me with questions about Wyoming. Ryan, more subdued than I remembered, asked thoughtful questions about my business. No one mentioned the abandonment directly, but it hung in the air between us, the unspoken reason for our 16-year separation. After dinner, as the sky began to darken, my father asked if I would join him in his study, once a forbidden territory, where he conducted business and family disciplinary conversations. "I'm not good at this," he began once we were seated. "But I owe you an apology, Mia. What we did, what I allowed to happen, it was unforgivable." I studied him, this man who had shaped so much of my early life through fear and criticism. "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. He was quiet for a long moment. "My father was cruel to me," he said finally. "He called it toughening me up. I thought that's what fathers did, what families did. It wasn't until you were gone, really gone, that I began to see how wrong it was." It wasn't a complete answer, and it certainly wasn't a sufficient excuse, but it was honest in a way my father had never been with me before. "I built a good life," I told him. "Despite everything." "I know," he said, nodding. "I followed your company online. You've done well for yourself, better than any of us expected." "That was part of the problem," I said quietly. "Your expectations were always about what I couldn't do, never what I could." He looked down at his hands. "I was wrong about many things." It wasn't the emotional reconciliation scene from a movie. There were no tears or dramatic embraces, just a quiet acknowledgement between 2 adults that mistakes had been made, harm had been done, and lessons had been learned. When I left Chicago the next day, I didn't know if I would ever return. I didn't know if the tentative connections re-established over that brief visit would grow or wither. But I knew that I had faced my past without being diminished by it, that I had shown my family not just that I had survived without them, but that I had thrived. Back in Wyoming, as Sam and the girls welcomed me home with hugs and questions about my trip, I felt a sense of completion. The abandoned young woman at the gas station had completed her journey, not by finding her way back to those who had discarded her, but by creating a life so full and rich that she could face them as an equal, undiminished by their past cruelty. That night, after the girls were asleep, Sam and I sat on our back deck, looking at the stars visible in the clear Wyoming sky. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. "I think so," I replied, not forgiveness exactly, but closure. The understanding that what happened shaped me but doesn't define me anymore. I thought about all the ways my life had changed since that day 16 years ago, the business I'd built, the family I'd created, the community I'd joined. None of it would have happened if my family hadn't made their cruel joke. Sometimes, the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best versions of ourselves. Sometimes, being left behind is the first step toward finding your way forward. Have you ever experienced a moment when something painful ultimately led you to something better? Share your story in the comments. Life has a way of revealing its purpose in the most unexpected ways, and I'd love to hear how that's played out for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if my journey resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I wish you strength and peace on yours.